The message arrived without a ship. It wasn't broadcast, it was simply known. On every screen, in every mind, across every continent, a single, silent declaration appeared, translated perfectly into all of Earth's languages. Species 731 designation human. Your developmental period is concluded. The verdict is chaos. You will be archived. They called themselves the Arbiters, an ancient silent race of crystalline beings who policed the galaxy not with fleets, but with logic. They didn't conquer, they curated. Worlds that evolved into harmonious collectives were nurtured. Worlds that devolved into conflict, which threatened the cosmic balance with their unpredictability, were archived. Their sun encased in a stasis shell, their culture frozen in time, a permanent monument to a failed experiment. Within an hour, the sky changed. A shimmering, invisible barrier, a logic field, descended, severing Earth from the cosmos. Every satellite went dead. Every deep space probe fell silent. Humanity's unified fleet, the Sole Defense Force, launched a counteroffensive. It was like watching moths fly into a bunk zapper. The ships didn't explode. Their systems simply ceased to function. Reactors went cold, navigation went dark, and 1,000-ton warships drifted aimlessly, their crews trapped in silent metal tombs. The United Council of Earth declared a state of emergency, but it was a hollow gesture. How do you fight a verdict? How do you wage war against a force that doesn't use weapons, only absolute, unshakable certainty? On the ground, panic gave way to a cold, grim resignation. The Arbiters hadn't fired a shot, but they had already won. They had judged humanity, found it wanting, and the sentence was cultural extinction. For 3 days, Earth waited in silence, a planet holding its breath. Then, something impossible happened. On the 4th day, the Arbiter's command vessel, a miles-long crystalline lattice hovering over the Pacific, detected a breach in the logic field. It was a single vessel, old, obsolete, a decommissioned colony ship named the Wanderer. It wasn't a warship. It was a relic, scheduled for scrap metal. And yet it sailed through the Arbiter's impenetrable barrier as if it wasn't there. The Arbiters, for the first time in 10,000 years, experienced an emotion they had long since archived: confusion. Their field was perfect, woven from the pure mathematics of reality. Nothing chaotic or illogical should be able to pass. But the Wanderer wasn't just passing. It was broadcasting a message on a tight, focused beam. Not a threat, not a plea. It was a formal, legal summons. On the bridge of the Arbiter vessel, the lead entity, the adjudicator, processed the transmission. It was a single line, spoken by a calm, steady human voice. By the authority of the first precepts, we challenge the verdict. We demand a trial of merit. The adjudicator paused. The first precepts were a forgotten footnote in their own legal code, a relic from a time when their logic was less absolute. A law that stated any species facing judgment could challenge the verdict, forcing the Arbiters to prove their case. No one had invoked it in millennia. They didn't even think anyone else in the galaxy remembered it. They had underestimated one thing about the chaotic species called humanity. They kept records. If you believe in humanity's knack for turning the tables with nothing but forgotten history and a stubborn refusal to lose, consider subscribing to Apex Fleet HFY. We're dedicated to bringing you stories just like this, where human ingenuity shines brightest in the darkest of nights. Back on Earth, in a dusty, forgotten archive beneath the Atacama Desert, one man watched a confirmation light blink green. Dr. Alistair Finch. Not a general, not a politician, but a historian. A man who had been ridiculed his entire career for studying the legal codes of extinct alien civilizations. He was the one who had unearthed the first precepts. He was the one who had commandeered the Wanderer. The ship's secret wasn't a weapon. It was its engine. A failed prototype from a century ago called a chaos drive. It operated by creating pockets of pure mathematical improbability, making its movements unpredictable. It was deemed too unreliable for navigation, but Alistair realized it was the perfect key for an illogical lock. It couldn't be predicted by the Arbiter's logic, so their field simply didn't see it. The acting director of the Sole Defense Force, General Eva Rostova, stormed into his office. Her face was a mask of fury. "What have you done, Finch? You've provoked them. You used a civilian ship to poke a god in the eye. A god with laws, Alistair said calmly, not taking his eyes off the screen. "You tried to fight them with force, General. You laughed before you began. Their strength isn't weapons, it's their certainty. I'm not fighting them. I'm challenging their premise." Rostova stared at him, speechless. "With a single historian and a museum piece? With the one thing they've forgotten," Alistair replied, "their own history." The trial of merit began. It wasn't held in a courtroom, but in the collective consciousness of both species. The adjudicator presented its case. Exhibit A, the entirety of human history. The wars, the betrayals, the genocides. Images of humanity at its absolute worst flooded the minds of every person on Earth. It was a brutal, soul-crushing testament to their capacity for chaos. The adjudicator's logic was simple and powerful. You have never known peace. Your nature is conflict. You are a threat to yourselves and eventually to the stars. Humanity's spirit buckled. The evidence was undeniable, but Alistair Finch was ready. He didn't present a counter-argument. He didn't make excuses. He presented his own exhibit. He called it Project Legacy, a secret archive he and a handful of other historians had maintained for decades. It wasn't a record of humanity's achievements, but of its corrections. For every war, he showed the peace that followed. For every act of cruelty, he showed the laws created to prevent it from happening again. For every failure, he showed the lesson learned. His argument was as simple as the adjudicator's. You see chaos, we see a pattern. A species that falls and learns and gets back up stronger. You judge us by our mistakes. We ask to be judged by our capacity to overcome them. If you're enjoying this story of humanity outsmarting a cosmic power with forgotten rules and sheer unpredictability, hit that like button. It tells the algorithm that stories of human resilience are what our community wants to see. The adjudicator was unmoved. Your corrections are temporary. The underlying chaos remains. We have seen this pattern before. Another species, long ago. The Varen. They were brilliant, chaotic, and ambitious too. They learned from their mistakes too, until they made one final mistake that extinguished 1,000 worlds, including their own. We were created to prevent a second Varen cataclysm. Your species follows their path too closely. This was the Arbiter's secret fear, the ghost that haunted their perfect logic. They weren't just judging humanity. They were seeing the shadow of a past apocalypse. The trial was at an impasse. Logic versus potential, history versus hope. So the adjudicator proposed a final test. A simulation beamed directly into Alistair's mind. He found himself on a new world, a human colony called New Terra. 200 years in the future. And it was failing. Factions had formed. Old rivalries from Earth had resurfaced. A civil war was brewing. The adjudicator's voice echoed in his mind. The pattern repeats, historian. The chaos is innate. Your task is to pass judgment. How do you stop the coming war? How do you correct this? General Rostova's voice, a memory from his own mind, argued with cold pragmatism. Make an example. Erase the most violent faction. Show them the cost of chaos. Prove to the arbiters that we can be as ruthless as they are to maintain order. It was a trap. If he chose violence, he would prove to the arbiters right that humanity's only solution was force. If he did nothing, the colony would destroy itself, proving their chaos was uncontrollable. Alistair looked at the simulated world, at the fearful faces of the colonists. He saw his own history in them, the mistakes, the anger, the pain. He made his choice. He didn't contact the leaders or the generals. He used the simulation's calm system to speak to the children. He didn't give them orders. He told them stories. Stories from Project Legacy. He showed them the record of old Earth's pointless wars, the famines caused by greed, the empires built on suffering. He taught them their own history, the raw, unfiltered truth of what their ancestors had endured and overcome. He gave them not a verdict, but a choice. Your ancestors made these mistakes, he broadcast to the entire colony. They paid for them in blood and tears. Their legacy is not the mistake itself, but the lesson they learned. Do you want to pay that price again? Or will you choose to be the first generation that learns from a book instead of a battlefield? He offered no solution. He gave no command. He simply held up a mirror. The simulation froze. Alistair was back in his archive, his heart pounding. The adjudicator was silent for a long, long time. Then a new thought echoed across the planet, not just from the adjudicator, but from all the arbiters at once. We had forgotten. We believed the only way to correct a variable was to remove it. You have shown us a different path. No correction, not control. Education. The logic field around Earth dissolved. The stars, bright and clear, returned. The arbiter's verdict was overturned, but they didn't leave. A new message appeared in the sky. Species 731, humanity. Your new designation is teacher. A galaxy guided by logic has become stagnant. We have lost the capacity for illogical solutions, like hope and compassion. We ask you to teach us. What would you have chosen in Alistair's place? Condemn the colony to prove humanity could be strong, or risk everything on the hope that they could learn? Let us know your verdict in the comments below. Earth was no longer a defendant. It was a peer. Alistair Finch, the quiet historian, had done more than save his species. He had reminded a race of ancient, logical gods that the greatest strength in the universe wasn't certainty. It was the capacity to change. Humanity, the chaotic, messy, unpredictable variable, was exactly what the galaxy needed. And for the first time, humanity looked at the stars not with fear, but with a shared sense of purpose. The age of survival was over. The age of teaching had just begun.